removed her in January, I would have saved 4 months in payroll. But now you live in a 24 hours notice. What do I do?
Hey, welcome back to the Ernie Chen Show. And of course, this is season 2 of the Ernie Chen Show. And this time around, we call it Talk Sense lah. Why Talk Sense lah? A lot of people have been asking me. Well, a lot of our politicians are absolutely doing all kinds of nonsense. And we are talking a lot of influencers doing all kinds of does not make sense things. And more importantly, people like us, you and me, are on a day-to-day basis are trying to figure out how to make sense of everything. So, it's important for us to have chit-chats, talk to the people in the industry, so that we are constantly moving forward to days that can be potentially better for you and I. So today, ladies and gentlemen, to kickstart our first episode of Talk Sense lah, I have invited a good bro of mine. Here is Nitesh Malani, the chairman of Yayasan Usahawan Malaysia. And of course, I want to talk to him more about what bosses want. Because a lot of people have been asking me, employees want this, employees want that. But when do we actually ask what bosses want? So today, ladies and gentlemen, I would like us all to welcome my good bro, Nitesh Malani. Yes.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you very much for coming here and on time. He is always very well dressed. I always tell him, man, he makes me look like a school college kid, which I am because I run education, right? So this man over here is Nitesh Malani, the chairman, founder of the Yayasan Usahawan Malaysia. So ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to have a little bit chit-chat with Nitesh and want to talk to him a little bit more about what bosses want, Why is it important to find out what bosses want? Because in the world, bosses are the entrepreneurs. They are the ones who create the job opportunities. They are the ones who decide what works, what does not, how to create more jobs for more people. If you can become a boss, that'll be fantastic. You'll be helping create more jobs, and then the economy will be better stimulated. So today, I would like to talk to Nitesh and ask him from a perspective of 3 segments, right? So the first segment, I'll talk a little bit more about what bosses want from their families. I think it's important to know what bosses want from family, because a lot of times it's what bosses provide for their family. So today is good for the families to understand better as to why their support is so critical and important. Then the second segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about what bosses want from employees, right? Because employees are constantly wanting more salary, wanting more promotions. They just want everything they can get from the bosses. So it's also good for us to better understand from the boss's perspective as to what do they want from the employees. And last but not least, of course, we'll also talk about what does bosses want from the government. I think that's important also, and rightfully, I think Nitesh should be the right person to share with us a little bit more about what bosses want from the government as well. So let's kickstart from the get-go and let Nitesh share a little bit more about himself. It's got a pretty interesting history and background as to where he came about. So Nitesh, could you tell us a bit more about who you are and what you have been doing to get yourself to today?
Thank you, Ernie. I think it's a very interesting topic. When Ernie launched Talk Sense lah, I think I reached out to him on Facebook. I said, what an interesting topic. And I think everything today is about talking sense. I think more and more we see post-pandemic, people have stopped talking sense in anything that they do. But firstly, let me introduce myself. Thank you, Ernie, for having me on your first show, I understand. And I think I came from a colourful rainbow background. So my major is in information systems. Not many people know that I did my business degree in IT and information systems while I was pursuing a career in the financial or the insurance industry from the age of 19. What an industry to be in, Ernie. I mean, insurance, financial planning, which I have also completed my chartered financial planning in my early 20s. So when I graduated, at that age, everybody wanted to do IT because it was the buzzword. Y2K, what course? Parents asked all of us, what do you want to do? The easiest thing was IT. But I think there was no clarity and clarification what did IT stand for at that point of time. Yes, I finished my bachelor's while also pursuing a career in the insurance world. It was such an amazing journey while I was doing insurance. It provided a lot of value to people that we spoke to. And I think one of the fundamental things that I advise a lot of young people today is the fact of whatever that you do, I think is providing value. The day that you understand that you're providing something that means a lot more to an individual, to a family. I have seen so many families receiving an insurance proceed. Of course, people don't want to talk about it most of the time, but I think it's such a valuable piece of I would call it an after effect when one leaves the world. I mean, in terms of death, what are you leaving back for your family? So I used to do a lot of work in the area of legacy planning, business insurance, business continuity, partnerships. Hence, I think I did pretty all right in my early 20s. Thereafter, I ventured into a world that was totally unknown, the building, environmental science, engineering. Again, when I was 25, I didn't know what I was getting into. It was an opportunity that someone came up to me and says, "Hey, try this." I had to, then I remembered, borrowed some money to even start that business because it required a bit of capital. So it was an interesting journey that went on pretty well because we were the pioneers and there was nobody in the industry. So I think whatever that I have done, it's always being the best. It's always being a pioneer and finding a very small niche in what we call in creating value.
So did you become a boss by chance, or will you call yourself an accidental boss or entrepreneur?
Well, I think I had an entrepreneurial mindset from the get-go. And if I may share, when I was maybe 6 or 7, I used to sell A&W masks, which was got free. So when you get this A&W mask, it's free from A&W, and I used to sell it to other kids for 20 cents at that point of time. So it's pretty interesting. And I think entrepreneurship, it's I wouldn't say you're born with those qualities, but I think being an entrepreneur requires a lot more skill than one thinks that I can become a boss.
So a lot of people just want to be an entrepreneur because they think it's cool, and then they became a boss. They have a lot of people on their payroll. They have buildings to pay. Every single month they have to pay bills. So it kind of gets a little bit pressured, right? So do you regret becoming an entrepreneur or a boss, or would it be better if you were just doing insurance, making a lot more money?
You know, sometimes I do have those mixed feelings. I always talk to my wife and she says, "Hey, Nitesh, you should have just sticked on to your insurance industry." But I would say otherwise, Ernie, because being an entrepreneur provides its own challenges, and it also provides its own, I would call it, a point of satisfaction when you achieve a particular goal. As I mentioned, I came from an insurance industry which is extremely goals driven. You set your goal for 12 months, 24 months, and sometimes even 5 years. Very interesting question as an entrepreneur, as you and I are. We always ask people that we speak to, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? I think if you were to ask a young person today, they wouldn't be able to answer you that question. So it becomes very difficult to even comprehend when one doesn't have a goal. So I would advise that goal settings, providing a direction as big as they can be, is very, very important and essential, not only towards bosses, but I think towards people who are getting out into the real world.
And you represent the Yayasan Usaha Malaysia, so you really speak to and talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of bosses out there on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure a lot of them have found in each other the comfort of sharing the challenges and the difficulty. And a lot of times, we don't want to go home to talk to our family because sometimes we feel the family don't understand what we go through or what we are feeling, right? Because why every single day you're fighting out there, you're trying to get things going. And then when you come back, it's either you listen and become the sponge to take in more from your wife or your children, or you totally shut them out. Which have you taken? Which route?
I think very, very important, Ernie. I think that's a good question. Your family is your backbone. The successes of most successful entrepreneurs, if you see out there, don't take Elon Musk because he doesn't have one to speak about. But I think most successful entrepreneurs that we have known have an extremely strong backbone. And I think spouses or family as a whole play an extremely important role in the journey as what you mentioned, because we come back with lots of trouble in the day, challenges. I wouldn't call it trouble, challenges, good, bad, ugly. And I think it's very important that family plays a role to balance up. I remember in my challenging time, and not only my wife, I think my dad played an extremely important role in comforting, in providing right advisors, support, both may not be financial support, but I think moral support is key when you make certain critical decisions. Example, investments into properties. Sometimes as entrepreneurs, we make very erratic moves. I want to buy a car. I got the money, but somebody needs to balance this up. I remember when at the height of or at the start of COVID, I wanted to buy a Porsche, and I came back home and I told my wife, and she says, "You must be nuts. People are struggling at this point of time, and why would you want to go and buy a Porsche?" So eventually, I took her advice and I cancelled the booking.
Okay.
And I thought, yeah, if she didn't advise me correctly or even knocked my head, I would have gone and bought a Porsche. But at that point of time, because I wanted it, I could afford it. Why not? But again, this is, I think, the point that you say a family plays an important role, and I think it's extremely valuable for bosses to always talk sense when it comes to decisions that they make, both on a point of stability of moving forward, or I would call it a grounding point.
Sure. But there's a lot of bosses who don't talk sense. I mean, you raised the point of Elon Musk. I think it's not just Elon Musk. You have quite a few different families, married a couple of times. There are a lot of very successful bosses. Would beg to differ with your opinion. They would say, sometimes you just need to be so focused on the work, you don't need the family. In fact, the family is the last thing you want to think about and talk about, because they are the distraction that you don't need as a boss. I mean, there are two types of entrepreneurs. Some entrepreneurs does better with family. I think you do, I do.
Sure.
The right family, of course. And of course, there are also those entrepreneurs who does so much better without the other half of them, who's always there trying to get them to get on the phone and come back and spend more time on holidays and everything else. What do you think about these entrepreneurs?
I think there is no right and wrong when it comes to entrepreneurs. Bosses always think that they are right. Hence they're called bosses, or one calls them entrepreneurs. I was fortunate enough, Ernie, in my early years of meeting and experiencing a lot of mindfulness, motivation gurus in their own field, because the insurance industry provides you this. Handling rejections is one of the areas that the insurance industry or sales industry provide you this. Not many entrepreneurs today can manage and handle rejection. And I think rejection is part and parcel of what we do every day. We get 9 no's for 1 yes. That's an average rule of thumb. And I think when it comes back to the point of family, I personally feel it's a grounding point. It's a place that you go to when you need the right advisors. Families are deemed to be individuals or a group of people that will only mean well for you, unlike people of an external point of view where they have an interest. So what's the determination or the analogy of a family? A group, a unit that always means the best for you.
So when you talk about family, do you have to talk sense to them on a day-to-day basis, or it's just purely based on love and not love?
I think it's a differentiation between what is sense all about, right? And of course, I think talking sense and being truthful. I mean, my wife asks me a question every day because she's not involved in my business as such. how was your day, and what went right and what went wrong. And I think we talk about this if I'm able to talk. Most of the time, of course, I say is, uh, uh, I don't want to burden you with the mess that's happening, but yeah, I mean, she's fully aware of the challenges we face. It's never a bed of roses. There are thorns that come into your journey, and I think if you don't have a partner, if you don't have a support system that continuously checks, or even looks out for your better interest, it's going to be trouble moving forward.
That's good. That's good. To start the whole entire conversation. I think what we'll do is take a short break over here, and we come back. We will then look at what does bosses want from their family. All right. Let's
Okay.
go to a commercial break. Hi, I'm Ernie Chen, Chairman of PORTMAN College, the Business Education Specialist. Today I'm going to share with you why PORTMAN College specializes in business and we provide real education. Throughout this tour, you will understand more. Come, join me. As you can see, our vision is to be Asia's #1 business school. Why? Because we believe that real education is about practical learning. You can have theory, but at the end of the day, theory means nothing if you do not know how to apply it. Join me and find out how real application of real theory is applied in business in PORTMAN College. Welcome to Paramount, where our students get their hands on to cameras and lights, just like Hollywood do it the way the big boys play it. It's called lights, action, camera. Academic studies are important, but what's more important is that we need to have professional learning skills where leadership is developed, and more importantly, you learn those through clubs and associations. In PORTMAN College, we have a very active student council and also a student body that continuously develop new clubs from sports till business societies that you too can benefit from. Come check us out at PORTMAN College. And we're back on Talk Sense Love with Ernie Chen, and today we have my good friend Nitesh Malani, the chairman of Yayasan Usaha Malaysia, who is sharing with us on his journey being an entrepreneur, becoming a boss, and now we are talking about what bosses want from their family. So Nitesh, what do you really want from your family as an entrepreneur? And you've been speaking to so many entrepreneurs, you've been dealing with a lot of bosses. What do they really want from the family?
I think, Ernie, the most important thing that one or an boss or an entrepreneur would want from their family is support. I think moral support means a lot personally to me, and always being there during the peak and also during the bottom. So I think besides support is also always the words of wisdom, especially from parents. Somebody who has gone through the marathon of various cycles.
But don't we always feel as bosses that because I'm the one out there making the money, I'm the one out there fighting for our family, what can you advise me as a family member? What do you know what I go through on a day-to-day basis? What kind of moral support can you give me that will be significant enough for me to feel okay?
I think the word across the board here is communication. As we know, the day that you stop communicating, you stop talking, certainly I think that would be a downfall for many people out there. And I think we have seen among so many friends, the moment they stop communicating, you have these issues happening. Whether it's good, bad, ugly, I think it's extremely important to communicate the correct way. I agree with you that many times as entrepreneurs, we keep our problems to ourselves. We have banks to pay, we have debts, we have overheads. But I guess if you don't communicate this correctly with family, they don't know what you go through. They would expect for the fact that you're doing very well. But what if you're not? And if you can't spend 50,000 on a holiday and only 5, perhaps, but they would expect you to spend 50. But I guess if you communicate correctly, and I'm sure family would understand that, times are not all that great. It's challenging. Why do we need to spend 50? We could do a local holiday, perhaps.
What about the other side then? I mean, we're talking about if we are not doing so well, you communicate better. I mean, you were just sharing with me also earlier that sometimes when you do a lot better, let's say during the pandemic in your core business, you just make that millions and the millions and the millions. Do you change, or do your family change, or the expectation changes? How do you actually manage those situations?
I think expectations are like yo-yo. We play yo-yo, right? And they're good times, they're bad times. I wouldn't say bad; they're not so good times. We got to manage this, and I think one of the best things about bosses and entrepreneurs, they are adaptable to various situations. So the time that an entrepreneur aren't able to adapt to situations, these days we have a lot of problems with mental health. I see a lot of successful people get screwed loose in the head and they are unable to manage stress. So I think managing stress, managing situations, balancing, it's extremely important skill sets for a successful entrepreneur out there. So it's just not about making money. I think making money, a lot of people know how to do it, but managing the money, managing the expectations of people around you, especially family, managing challenges that come from both internal and the external factor becomes more predominant when you become successful. So managing expectations, communications, family support, it's important in achieving some goals as you move forward.
Did you ever change yourself? Did you ever change in the process of having more challenges, more difficulty, or even the other side where you started to see so much money? It's like, I don't need my wife and my children as much anymore.
I absolutely think I personally didn't change. I am the same guy I was when I was 20. I was still wearing suit when I was doing insurance. So I am still wearing it today because part of my dressing attire, if I would say, and it came from my sales background. As a salesman, you got to dress well. Otherwise, people will not want to even talk to you. So I guess, besides, I don't wear a tie nowadays because the Madani government says don't have to wear a tie. But no, I still feel naked without wearing a tie. But the fact is, I think it's also very important to groom well, and regulate this within my company, my people. It's extremely important to dress well, to feel well, to look well, because not to show to somebody, but I think it's a point of satisfaction in how you want to carry yourself, or how you want the other party to look at you as an individual. So I think grooming is important.
You see, it's really a double-edged sword. Sometimes when you become more successful as a boss, as an entrepreneur, you make more money, then you actually have to spend more time out to entertain more, to do more. I mean, I was just listening to KJ's and Cheryl's podcast. They are thinking of not coming back to politics. They are liking what they are going through right now. And one of the main reasons is because they even mentioned, they have to be out there at 1 o'clock in the morning, sitting in mama stores, chit-chatting with politicians and ground roots and everything else. So it's like, the more successful you are, the more time you have to be away from your family. How do you make that happen and possible? Because you were in that whole entire deal before.
I think it's a deception of opinion that when you are more successful, you need to spend more time outside. In my perspective, I think if you're more successful, you should be spending less time outside. Because if you are successful on a point of achieving certain goals, you should be having an autoplay unit that's operational outside. You should be now living with this newfound success towards yourself and your family, or at least the unit that you're talking about.
So you're saying I'm quite successful because I'm spending a lot of time with my baby?
I'm sure. I think there's two ways to talk about it. I mean, I remember pre-pandemic where I used to have this Malaysian culture of spending teh tarik sessions or even entertaining people outside. But during the COVID, we stopped doing that. We could not do that, right? And it was very interesting that we realized, you know what? The teh tarik sessions were not really productive. It was absolutely a waste of time. So now you realize I go to bed by 10:30 these days, and a lot of my business and also friends come back to me and say, "Hey, Nitesh, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you out?" Maybe it's age, maybe it's maturity, maybe it's understanding. But if it's only absolutely important, you go out. Again, in politics, in my political days, it was totally different because I think you need to meet people. You need to, you got to build you have people who are following you. You need to give time. Maybe during the day you don't have as much time, so you spend time in the nights.
But you do that, I do that. I'm sure you know, and you have quite a number of your friends, your good bros of yours, who are still partying very hard. I mean, they do their deals in the courtroom, they go and do their business, but at the end of the day, the moment 6 o'clock comes, they party like really literally drinking, having a good time. Why do they not change?
Not that I don't, or not that we don't. I think, like I use the word balance. Having a balanced life, it's extremely important. You can do that if you enjoy it, and if it meets your health, why not? We've also seen, Ernie, a lot of successful people collapsing without even being able to spend what they have earned. And I think this comes back to a point. You have worked hard for the last 20 years. You are unable to enjoy this newfound success. Does that make any sense for an entrepreneur?
Does an entrepreneur boss will actually listen to such advices? Because at the end of the day, we always think we're Superman until we are in the hospital, right? On the hospital bed.
And I think this is very apt to what you have done, right? Let's talk some sense.
Yeah.
Let's talk sense lah. I mean, in the sense that, guys, I'm not saying we are the best examples, but I've read, I've gone through, I've understood of how things should be done, and today more and more cases that we see people collapsing in their 35s, 45s. I think it was unheard of many years ago, and I think this already provides an alarm bell to say, hey, we need to take control. And this goes out to me and all of us again, right? How do we take control and how do we do things correctly? Work never ends. We are entrepreneurs. We are bosses. If we don't have work, we create new stuff. Just like you didn't create. You create new stuff every day, Ernie. So since the time I've known you, you have created. Every day I see something new. If not personally, on social media, and just like this talk show. Very interesting, right? Because we keep on innovating to find ways to market ourselves. We find ways to go out there just to drive some amount of revenue, successes, doing things that are of passion. I know entrepreneurs don't do things only for money, but a lot of things is with passion.
Yeah.
And I think passion drives entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Because if you're not passionate, you won't be doing this.
Yes. I think before I pivot to the next segment of it, if there's one word for what bosses want from family, what would that word be?
Love.
Love. Good. I think that sums it up from what bosses want from family, right? No matter how busy we get, how much we are out there, we are always doing it for the family, for ourselves. But at the end of the day, I think the love, the word itself, is what we all want.
I mean, love, care, compassion, support. I think they fall under the same bracket.
Yep.
So if you don't put this under the family category, then it's not family.
Yes. And with that, let's talk about the other part of the family that a lot of bosses would like to call them or address them as, you are my family. You are the people that I spend the next most amount of time, or in fact, I spend more time with you all than my own family at home. The employees. Employees always have this idea that the bosses are always making full use of them, optimizing every bit of their time to work for the boss, to make more money for the boss. And it's always about what employees want from the bosses, right? And what about what bosses want from employees? What do you think bosses want from employees in the big picture, big scale of things?
Wow, what an interesting question. I've never been an employee, so I really don't know the other side of the coin. But I tell you, Ernie, over the last 22 years, I would safely say, or maybe longer, I've always taught myself on two sides of the chair. Maybe that's my character. Whenever I speak to an employee or I engage with one, I would always say, try sitting on my chair and let me sit there. to understand the situation.
Does it work? Do they actually?
No, absolutely not. Most of the time it doesn't. But I think that's an ideal situation in the best point of looking at things, right? Well, I think it's a mindset. One word, if you want to describe that, is attitude, right? Hence, I always tell people they are not entrepreneurs and we are. They are not bosses and we are. And they come from that playing field. I'm not saying we are always right or they are wrong, but I think it's about having the right attitude. Personally, to me, I think when it comes to my family as an employees, yes, we treat them right. We treat them with care. We treat them with lots of love, if you may call it. But I think it comes down to a point of highlighting of what that individual would want. I have learned lately in any of this interview or any new employees, even prior to them joining, to give them a blank piece of paper and to write 10 things that they want. And I think that's very important. Tell me exactly what you want on a blank piece of paper. And on the other side now, tell me exactly what out of the 10 things that you would want to achieve in the next 3 years.
But do you think these employees who write these 10 things for you are mature enough to tell you what they want or even know what they want? Or they just...
Well, if they don't have 10 things, don't hire them. I've just learned this. I think it's a new way of perhaps doing or managing people. Because I personally, Ernie, told myself that I'm not a good manager. I can't manage people. And I think I learned this way back in my early days where we have 7 chakras. If you believe in chakras, there is no definition that this is not real. This is science. We have 7 strengths in an individual. And if you understand the strengths, you would then start becoming a bit more focused in your strength. Not everybody is born to be an entrepreneur.
Sure.
Everyone is born with one strong chakra. And chakra it's a science of the planetary, the science of what everything is all about. We believe in feng shui, we believe in vastu, we believe in so many things, if you do believe. And I think if you understand the 7th element, what we call it, and you understand your strength, and when one works on it, you realize that this is how you need to move towards achieving your goal. I know some employees who make millions. They don't even need to be bosses, right? CEOs of large organizations probably make much more amount of money than putting all of us together, right? Without risk. Well, they are good at what they do. They come in with a lot of strength. So it depends how you position things. To answer your question also on whether employees believe what they do is essentials, I think people change over time. Somebody who's been with you, we had a couple of people really young that I groomed, over the last 9-10 years. Some of them came up to me and says, "Hey, Mr. Nitesh, I don't see a future in the company." Wow. After 9 years, you say, "I don't see a future." So I think, is it something wrong with the company? Is it something wrong with me? Or is something wrong with you? Because the element of suddenly starting to become an entrepreneur, why am I making so much of money for my boss? But what about the challenges that we went through over the 9 years? What about the merry-go-rounds it took to groom you as an individual? But this is forgotten. So I think it's a balanced game when it comes to your team that we play. Yes, I respect you as a family. Bosses are always made to understand that I need to feel for you, but does it come the other way around? When they want to leave, they will put a letter on the table and says, "Thank you so much. I had a good time." And typical letters these days is on ChatGPT, very nicely written. Thank you for the wealth of experience. I enjoyed my stay. Blah 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 blah, and they go. That's when you realize, my God, what happened? I mean, you have been with me for so long. I think it would have come to a point. I need to make more. I want to do this. So I think the point of writing those notes on the blank piece of paper would help us maybe evaluate. They are not wrong, but did we look into their concerns? Maybe an employee down the road wants to buy a BMW, but he or she realized after 7 years, I'm still struggling financially, while I'm not achieving what I wanted to achieve. Then you go back to this paper and says, hey, look, you never told me you wanted to buy a BMW. You told me you wanted to get married and have 3 kids. So that was your direction. I mean, what's wrong? You never told me that you wanted to make ringgit. But if I knew, then I would probably direct you towards that.
But you see, a lot of people within that time frame can change very fast, very easily because of influence and also, of course, access to online.
Sure.
You see the lifestyles of the influencers, you see the lifestyles of individuals who are selling you that actually, right? I mean, I ask myself, I always go back and think back to myself being a startup entrepreneur, where we always want to be the next Google, providing the food, the cool office space. I mean, those are the dreams of entrepreneurs and bosses of what we want to do. But over the years of having so many employees come through my doors, there are all kinds of employees. They do stupid things, you know. Your employees where you want to make sure everyone feel empowered. You give them keys to your office, and then when you ask them to come back and just return the key because you're leaving the organization, they just put your key outside the office where anyone can just take it and come into your office and steal everything, right? I mean, we learn from situations of empowering employees, of what we want from employees is the return of that trust that I have in you. But most of the time, it doesn't happen. But then again, I ask myself the question, is it something wrong with the employee? Is it something wrong with me? I'm not able to meet everybody's needs? It doesn't make sense, man. So to talk sense as an entrepreneur, how to make sense of it all when it will never actually meet. Employees always want this, bosses always want this, and I have not been an employee or they have not been a boss, so it doesn't match.
You know, Ernie, to come on that, some years ago I learned, and I read a lot about this over the years. There's 3 points to look at in running a business. One is people. Certainly, without people, we can't grow, we can't do things because you and I are not good at everything. And I think the next thing, it comes towards processes of what exactly your business, your unit would require. And I think the third thing is systems. We today need more and more systems to do what we are doing. Which is the most important? We always said it was people. I think it's been about 5-6 years where I think I've defined the fact that of people being the most important thing in this equation. And I think here where I would look at is processes being number one.
So you're saying people of all these HR consultants and all these big bosses is just a PR talk? People is our greatest assets?
No, I think it's all PR talk because what they focus on is processes. Most of these MNCs out there or the larger organizations, if you're hired as a admin person, don't even try to do anything else. You're hired for a task. So it's a process. You're hired with a distinctive job description. Is given to you from your day one. In the event if you last in that organization a bit more longer, perhaps you get a promotional or maybe a change of role if you have additional skill sets. But again, this is your JD. Do according to your JD. Don't try to be smart.
I find this very interesting. I want to dig a little bit deeper into it. Why? Because I feel that when I started my business, I wanted everyone to feel as though they're part of the family. They were building something together with me, right? And as I was trying to grow the business, I think it's very similar to what you're trying to tell me here, is processes is so important because you're trying to grow a business. You can't ensure that everyone feels the same way towards wanting to grow the business. So you can replace someone if the processes are in place. So will the people, the employees, our family feel that, a process is more important than me now. That means I don't think I'm going to grow in this organization. So where is the balance, or where do you draw the line?
I think it's an SME problem, right? Being an SME, we have seen this all along the while. We manage Seba as a platform. I've met thousands of business owners over my course of undertaking Seba and at YUM, hundreds of networking sessions, both in the governmental units and also the private sector. And I realize it's an SME problem where we try to make our people do more than 2-3 things, and certain processes are not complied with, right? And we expect individuals to deliver a bit more because, hey, I'm paying you 5,000, make sure I get 50,000 worth of ROIs. While the other side of the coin, the MNCs have got a process and they don't care. If I'm paying you 5,000, if I need you to deliver 500,000 worth of value, that's what you're hired for. And I think they have a bit of processes in place because if you don't deliver once, you get a warning email. Second, you get a warning email again. Perhaps counseling by your superior. And third, probably a final letter to say, thank you very much, bye-bye. There is no personal correspondences between the owner, shareholders, and that person. In a lot of our cases, we become personal. We know their families, we know their backgrounds. After a while, we know enough about those individuals, right? And I think this emotional attachment, I would call it emotional attachment, becomes a stumbling block towards providing warnings. Whose fault is it? It's our fault. I blame myself for it. I mean, I had an employee in recent times. I wanted to ask her to leave in January, but I felt bad for her. She has family, she has this, not going through well. I gave her notices, as in verbal, counseling, called her into my room, spoke to her, and I said, this is where, you have so much of potential, don't waste it. But eventually, when she wanted to move, she gave us a 24 hours notice. Thank you so much. Again, a very nicely scripted letter to say, I'm going. And this is when I realized I should have removed her in January. I would have saved 4 months in payroll. But now you live in a 24 hours notice. What do I do? Where do I go? What are the avenues out there? Right? So did he or she think about the company? Did he or she think about the colleagues or the boss who gave her that opportunity? And I think the answer is no. So I've been soul searching and deep thinking about this. Who do we blame? I don't blame her. I blame ourselves. So as an entrepreneur, I think it's very important. Even though I say it, sometimes we fail to execute this because we have emotional attachments.
I think that's perfectly answered because I think I'm growing then as a businessman, as also an entrepreneur, and as a boss. Why? Because I no longer have the emotional attachment. I just chop.
I need to learn from you that.
I think it's a journey of getting burned as a boss of what we want,
We have got burned 100 times and we continue to get burned, some of it which Ernie personally. But I think these are lessons in an entrepreneurial journey that money can't buy.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, before we move to the last and final segment of what do bosses want from the government, one word to represent on what bosses want from employees. What would that one word be?
Loyalty.
With that, we will go to a commercial break and come back with what bosses want from the government.
In addition to the academic skills, there are 5 professional skills that we focus on over here in PORTMAN College for our students. Why? Because it's so important for them to get hired. You need to have great English communication skills. You need to have great presentation skills, communication skills that's interpersonal. You then need to have the grooming skill to get you right in front to create a great impression for the people that you communicate with. And lastly, interviewing skills so that you get hired for the job that you've always dreamt about. Every day after you graduate, it's all about making money, it's all about being able to pay bills. The problem is, in education, especially in Malaysia, we do not cover financial education. Right at PORTMAN College, we start you right because why? You got to understand how you can leverage on the financial institutions, how you can buy your first house, and how you can be investing. We call this our make, our give, our invest, our save, and spend strategy. So it's very important for you to always understand, if you want to do well in life, you got to follow the strategies of financial education that you too will do very well. Welcome to the ITT Wall of Fame. This is ITT Industry Talk Thursday, Experience Worth Sharing. What kind of experience are we talking about? We're talking about every industry's professionals. Our business community will come from the banks, from the insurance, from the tech-based companies. Literally every industry comes every Thursday to speak to our students. This is really why we bring the industry to the classroom. Literally. Come and check us out at Industry Talk Thursday every Thursday. At PORTMAN College, we have the Ernie Chen Show, where we invite the movers and shakers of the business community, where politicians, business entrepreneurs are here to share with us how you too can become the movers and shakers of the future generations. Well, I believe you have just gotten a snippet, an idea, a sneak preview as to what your experience in PORTMAN College will be. Come and join us, and more importantly, do contact us and be part of our trial classes and our open days. Every single week, we look forward to you becoming a Portmanian right here at PORTMAN College with us to experience beyond education at PORTMAN College.
And we're back on Talk Sense La with Ernie Chen. And today we have Nitesh Malani, the chairman founder of Yayasan Usaha Malaysia with us. We've been talking about what bosses want from family, what bosses want from the employees. And now I think it's very beneficial also for bosses, what bosses want from the government, the Madani government, right? I mean, for the longest time, we've been saying that let's just give this man a chance. Anwar Ibrahim PMX. Everyone said it's about time, it's his opportunity, it's time for him to show us what he can do. But then you now see on the ground, everyone is saying that same old shit, nothing has really happened. What do bosses really want from the government right now?
Thank you, Ernie. I think it's a very interesting topic that's close to my heart because being involved in politics in my early days and also having many friends at that level in the government, I think the government's job is not to get into business, and I think that's a first statement, right? The government's role is not to get into business. The government's job is to empower and provide directions towards businesses to flourish. I think that's rule number one, and sadly, we have seen very little of those processes in the last, 20 months that PMX has been there. But I also believe PMX as an individual and as a leader has shown great strength towards positioning Malaysia as the hub towards investment, being investor friendly, as we have seen in the last 6-7 months. More and more people are becoming very comforting towards Malaysia at the top tier. Now, as you mentioned, we gave this gentleman an opportunity after struggles of so many years. I think, for one, I wouldn't say there's no other leaders around, but I think PMX as an individual, Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim, is a leader with a lot of charisma, a lot of knowledge, and I think his years of going through the marathon in the political scheme of things, he for one certainly is someone that Malaysia needs at this point of time. And not to say I'm siding him or I'm in support of the current government, but I think as a government, it's not a one-man role, just like businesses. We run our companies. It's not about you or me. It's about the unit. Now, this unit certainly needs to be corrected as a whole approach, perspective of how GLCs were competing in tenders, in bids. I think over the last 20 years, we saw a lot of policies that went wrong. Example, I'm in full support to Bumiputra empowerment policies or the Bumiputra agenda that was raised by the previous prime ministers or the government. But the fact here is this Bumiputra policy was misused. It was mistreated. Now, we have abundance of friends who are Malays. Unfortunately, there's only a very small percentage of Bumiputra who have benefited from these schemes. It's not across the board.
So whose fault is it? I mean, all these policies were put in place by the previous administrations, and at the end of the day, it didn't benefit a lot of Bumiputra, the Malays, our friends out there. So whose fault is it? Was it the previous administration put in place policies and didn't have the political willpower to ensure that it actually happened?
I think it was the political willpower. I think that's perhaps the right word to put it. Right, there was no political willpower, or there was misjudge or misuse of such policy that was put in place. As 15 years I spent in politics, every year in, year out, we talk about equity empowerment. They always looked at the Bumiputra's equity within the Bursa Malaysia equity structure. And every year, the debate was, how do I increase the Bumiputra equity to a certain level to match the Chinese, or I would say the non-Malays? I mean, after 20 years, if you still keep on talking about the same equity empowerment, something must be really wrong somewhere. And I think this is something that perhaps the current Madani government or even PMX needs to look at this on a serious note of equality in distributing the country's wealth. It was staggering to hear what the current head of MSCC said recently. In the last 5 years, the government has lost potentially 272 billion ringgit towards corruption. It's very interesting to know where this money went, because 270 billion ringgit is a lot of money. It's perhaps far more than our reserves that we have.
But if you think about this kind of numbers, it is only possible if it's right at the top.
Certainly. So it's a policy that the government needs to re-look at on an immediate basis, because here we hear at the ground, people are today talking about the removal of oil subsidies. People are talking about the removal of various subsidies. Cost of living has gone higher by about 60%. Cost of things, US dollars have appreciated, ringgit have depreciated now. So where do we balance this? We could use 100 ringgit to go and have a meal for a family of 5, and today 100 ringgit is spent for a family of 2. Where does this money stretch? How did this happen over the last 5 years? We all understand inflation. I think this is a global phenomenon, and inflation is across the board. Nevertheless, has the income disparity moved up? And I think, in my personal opinion, it has not. The guy in McDonald's still earns what he earns an hour, what it was 5 years ago. I don't think so. The disparity of income has rose over the years. Now, this is a question mark, because what we have seen in other countries that are developed, we have seen an uprise of people. Now, that is the last thing you and I would want to see in this beautiful country called Malaysia that we love, and we were born here. So, in order to avoid people's uprising, what the government needs to do for businesses is empower entrepreneurs, empower businesses. And the moment that happens, the wealth distribution will be very evenly distributed, and we would see more happy people around.
But you see, we know of this, and we know of every single administration talks about making sure entrepreneurs are empowered so that jobs are created, wealth distribution distributed. But at the end of the day, it is still the same thing after 20 years. So when we talk about all these policies, it's always the execution that is not reaching.
I mean, this is certainly not something that I would say it in the open, but let's talk some sense in this podcast, because it's what the topic is all about, right? And I'm going to be a bit more critical, and I think this comes back from the attitude of the civil servants. Typically we had the Bumiputra scheme of things that happened over the last 20 years, and I think 20 years back, if you may recall, maybe we were a bit more younger, but what I always understand from the elders out there, you had a fair distribution of races at very senior positions within the government structure, whether it was income tax, whether it was the police, whether it was immigration, whether it was whatever not. The Ministry of Finance Secretary General was Tan Sri Raman Navaratnam, for example, an extremely well-established individual. Knew the directions of doing things, and the Ministry of Finance were actually lots of educated individuals. I'm not saying it's not today. There are really good people in the administration. Unfortunately, I think because of its attitude of the civil servants today of being, you know what, you can't do anything to me because you can't transfer me, you can't sack me because I'm into the government PTD infrastructure. So buat apa yang perlu buat lah, saya tak kisah. And today you go to counters of government agencies from JPJ. I had a friend who went to renew his passport yesterday. It took him 4 hours to even clear his number. Why in this age of technology, we are moving in towards AI. I think the government, Microsoft just announced 10 billion in investment into Malaysia, AI. I mean, if you go to the immigration offices, you still see people waiting for 4 hours. Oh my God. Don't we have the right technology to expedite things? And you walk in 15 minutes, do what you need to do, walk out. And we had this. I remember passport renewal. There was a point before pandemic, they had kiosks that you could go take your picture and passport is issued. I think the next day or within the same day in the evening, you could pick it up. Why are we going backwards?
Well, I always see it as leaders put in place are the ones to ensure that these things happen or don't happen. So when you said there's that window that actually happened, perhaps at that time there was a good leader in place.
Sure, I think Dato Sri Najib at that point of time, I mean, like I said, I'm not siding a particular leader in this stand, but I think during the administration of Dato Sri Najib, there were a lot of these areas that was tightened. Again, it's not leader. I would say it's a whole scheme of things. Like we spoke about between bosses and employees. And I think he's a good boss, but he's trying to clear the mess that was created. And this mess is a legacy.
So who created all this mess for all these leaders?
None other than Tun Mahathir.
Tun Mahathir, right? I mean, a lot of people always say that he's the one who created all this mess,
Yes.
right? So if he created all this mess and he is still alive to be running around saying what he wants to say, why have not a single premier have decided or taken action to put him in position or to fix the issues that needs to be fixed?
I think if you follow what's happening now, PMX is towards that direction. I mean, this man is 98 years old, Ernie. You wouldn't want to take him and throw him in the jail. Or even take him to court. I think Tun Mahathir, I've got a lot of respect for that man. He placed and positioned Malaysia where we are today. As a young boy traveling to India and they would ask you where you're from, and I have to say Malaysia, and say, where is Malaysia? Next to Singapore. And that was the time when he built the Twin Towers, the F1 tracks, the beautiful KLIA we have. That put us into the global map.
Well, that's one school of thought, right? Which is to put us on the global map. But also on the other school of thought, it was him who put us with all these Twin Towers, Sepang F1, that put us into the deficit of the government to today.
In politics, it's very interesting a concept, right? And I think this is a global phenomenon in politics that's democratically run. Typically, in organizations, when you say your employees are smarter than you, would you still keep them hired? You would want to transfer them out, or don't be too smart. Listen to me, right? You're not talking sense because I'm the boss. You listen to me. And I think typically politics is such where you don't want your people to be smarter than the political system. So keep them at bay. Don't make them too intelligent and intellectual. As long as they are there and they continuously need you for support, they will keep on voting for you.
Well, I think the whole idea is from an emotional standpoint. The people will always vote for you, but the numbers tell a different story. We are in the mess that we are today because of what Tun Mahathir put in place.
Absolutely.
And if we are talking about that, then no premier or no PM before the current administration has taken enough steps to overcome it. I was even told once that the only prime minister that was actually putting in place the right policy to get us on the right track is actually Tun Badawi. And before we know it, he was actually said being a prime minister that was sleeping. Now, from the entrepreneur business owner's perspective, do we really care so much about all these things that's happening, or what do I just want from the government that you can give me? And the government always give this grant, that grant. Is that the solution? The government always provide this platform to say that they're empowering. Does it really work? Because the entrepreneur environment in Thailand, I used to make movies, I used to edit movies, and I used to do my final mix in Thailand, right? Bangkok. And we talk about film grants in Malaysia. You're allowing companies to get grants like the KRU boys, grant after grant after grant. Who would not make money if your whole production cost is already paid for by the taxpayers' money, right? And whatever you sell, ticket sales is just yours. Well, as I go to Thailand, they say, grant? What grant you talking about? There's no such thing. So they become better entrepreneurs. So is this empowering of the entrepreneurs really what the bosses want?
Honestly, no. I would agree with you, Ernie. I think this grant or free handout is not something the government should be doing. There are various other ways that people can be empowered. Yes, when you talk about grants, I think the education outfits require a certain amount of money to conduct researches. I think PMX should make do with a lot of agencies. Let me talk a subject matter that's close to YUM. When we started YUM, or when we incorporated YUM as an NGO, we realized there was more than 100 over government-linked organizations, ministries, agencies that was dealing with entrepreneurs. I don't have the numbers now, but I don't think so it's any lesser. Today you have SME Corp, METI, Matrade, Meranti, Cradle, MOF. You want to deal with agriculture, you run to Mardi.
But isn't that, to put it crudely, a way for people to make money?
100%. I think there's a lot of wastage in resources, wastage in talent. I don't see consolidation being done by PMX and the current team. But I think he needs to juggle politics. That's the truth of the matter. Because when you are also afraid of your shadow, how are you going to move forward? Because every time you see a shadow, you want to say, hey, something is happening. So I think that's also politics that's involved here. So I think where the question was what the entrepreneurs want from government, I think it's a balance between political stability against administrative correctness. So how do I take certain actions? I can't be sacking the entire and replacing them with new people overnight. We have seen, whether I would call it positive changes in entirety, no. The answer is no. But personally, I think I've seen some changes. Whether people expected Dato' Sri Anwar to do things overnight, it's going to be tough for that man. And it's not going to be tough or easy for any leader for that matter. Even if Khairi, as a person that many are looking out to be the Prime Minister of the future, it's going to be tough when he's been put into that position. I for sure have a lot of respect for that man, KJ, for doing what he's doing before, now, and I think in the future. He probably would lead Malaysia one day, in the near future, hopefully. But whether he'll be able to change single-handedly, the answer would be no. He would still be required to balance his political maneuvering and stability towards managing the resources of the country. But what's sad, Ernie, is that if I'm talking about the staggering numbers that was released in the open of 272 billion, and that's only 5 years. What happened, or what are the numbers in the last 25 years? Is that something that you can decipher from? Where is this money? I mean, it's very interesting. If you go to London, and when you tell somebody in London that you're from Malaysia, they have extremely high regards for you, not because of Malaysia, and they feel all Malaysians are rich because Malaysians come to London and spend 10, 15, 20,000 pounds as there was no tomorrow. They dine in the best restaurants. If you go to Dubai, most Malaysians dine in some of the best places in Dubai that cost thousands of dirham. Where does this money come from?
Which is my next question. I always find it very interesting. You said bosses would want to have a good leader to balance the administration and also to clean things up. Do we really want KJ as the prime minister to clean things up? Or are the bosses so comfortable because they can spend tens and 20 thousands of pounds? Where do the money come from, right? It has got to come somewhere. Are Malaysian bosses just so comfortable in the cable and just close that deal and just enjoy life? Or do we really want a leader to clean things up?
I mean, you and I are entrepreneurs, Ernie. Whatever it takes to make it happen. I think that's the attitude of an entrepreneur. And as far as the system is not structured, in my personal opinion, this will keep going on. But I personally hope it changes, where we work on merits. Are we saying that there's no corruption in Singapore? Are we saying there's no corruption in Australia? I'm sure there is. Ultimately, it may not be on the verge of corruption. We saw a very senior minister in Singapore recently being charged and certainly brought to the open for accepting, a bottle of wine, a couple of tickets to F1, and holiday with his family. And do you consider that corruption or a thank you? And as far as people are concerned, it's look, you have helped me to a process. I'm going to thank you with something. So what do I thank you with? Do I give you money? Do I give you things? Do I say, hey, Ernie, take your family for a holiday? Don't worry, taken care. Is that corruption? Now these are question marks. That is very difficult. You can't do this in China for some reason. But China, as a country that ran on a communal basis and still that, they saw massive corruption. And I think the current administration has decided because they can. There is a one-man show. There is extreme political will. I don't have to even ask you, because if I want to slaughter, bang, the whole regiment goes. And I think that's what President Xi Jinping has done in China. Cleaned up the mess once and for all. I call it the carpet bomb. Can you do that in Malaysia? I think the answer is no. And it's going to be extremely tricky a situation. Now, politically speaking, and as the chair to YUM, I am looking forward to the next 36 months of PMX to clean things up in totality. Now, this is going to be very exciting period, because as we see more and more foreign capital flowing into the country, I think there must be a balancing game of equality being distributed. So let's wait and see. Let's give the man another 1 year. Perhaps we could do another show in the next 12 months and maybe revisit this conversation to say, did PMX did well or otherwise?
Well, we would definitely look forward for him to do well, not because he is Anwar Ibrahim. I mean, as bosses of the country, we would like the country to flourish so that our businesses can flourish, so that Malaysians can have more money in their pocket, not that 50 ringgit that you can only buy 2-3 items in your whole entire basket. I mean, we really, really got to do better as Malaysia, right? So that it makes sense for us to talk more sense. Right?
Exactly.
So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And before I end off, once again, one word from the bosses of what they would want from the government. What would that one word be?
Stability.
Stability, that would be. And of course, the whole entire last 1 hour, we have talked a lot of sense, and a lot of sense has been made by Nitesh Malani, the founder chairman of Yayasan Usaha Malaysia. And if you found that this entire podcast was useful and was entertaining and edutaining for you, do subscribe and follow for us to talk more sense lah next time with Ernie Chen. With that, thank you very much, Nitesh, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we look forward to have one more round, perhaps end of next year, so that we can actually revisit to talk about whether PMX has done well for the businesses. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for joining us. What bosses want from employees, their family, and also the government. With that, thank you very much. We'll see you in the next episode.